to this meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee, which, due to government advice to practice social distancing, will be held virtually. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as is possible following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting from remote locations. Please could everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members, officers and any public speakers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point. But I would ask that with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. If any members and officers wish to raise a point or question, they should press the hands up icon on the screen at the top right-hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I will come to you in the order I receive requests. Please do not use the chat button, as on Teams we cannot clear any text on the meeting recording, as we could when we were previously using Skype for meetings. Please also lower your hand once you have finished speaking. In the event that the committee requires to vote on an item of business before it at the meeting, the Democratic Services Officer will ask you in turn to announce your vote, either for, against or abstain. I will then ask the Democratic Services Officer to announce the decision made by the committee following this process. Officers from Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. Before we formally commence, I will now ask the officer from Democratic Services to announce the names of the councillors in attendance at this meeting. I would also ask the officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. The Democratic Services Officer is now to announce the member in attendance.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. For the benefit of the recording, my name is Andrew Rees, Democratic Services Manager. I'm joined at the meeting today by my colleagues Mark Galvin, Senior Democratic Services Officer Committees, and Michael Pittman, Democratic Services Officer. The members in attendance today are Councillor Walters as Chair, Councillor Alex Williams, Councillor Hussain, Councillor Amanda Williams, Councillor Janice Lewis, Councillor Mike Kern, Councillor Pam Davis, Councillor Paul Davis, Councillor Beadle and Mrs Jo Williams, the lay member. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. And so we'll now move to item number 2, any declarations of interest, please. Oh, sorry, first of all, it's apologies first. I do apologise, but Amanda, you've put your hand up. Was that for declarations of interest?
No, it was for apologies.
Sorry, yeah. So apologies from?
Yeah, Cheryl Green. She can't get into Teams. She's got IT working on it now, trying to get her into the meeting. And I was late, so I need to give my apologies because my computer, I think, is getting rather hot today and it shut me down. So if I disappear, I'm having IT issues as well.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Thanks, Amanda. And Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have to leave at 3:15. I have another engagement I can't get out of, I'm afraid.
OK, thank you very much for letting me know. Thank you. OK, then, so moving on to item number 2, declarations of interest, please. I'll take silence as no declarations of interest. So then moving on to Item number 3, the approval of minutes. Has everybody had the chance to read them? And if so, could I have a mover? And thank you. Any questions on the minutes? Any comments on the minutes? Lovely, thank you very much. If that's all agreed, we'll now move on to item number 4. So I'll ask the Democratic Services Manager to take us through the action record.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is to provide the committee with an update on the committee's action record. The action record is devised to assist the committee in tracking the actions and decisions made by the committee in the exercise of its functions and that they are actioned and implemented. The action tracker is appended to the report. The recommendation in the report is for the Audit Committee or Governance and Audit Committee to note the action record. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So, sorry, I'm having to flick between screens. I do apologise. So, Jill, you've raised your hand. Would you like to say something?
Yes, could I come in on this action record, Chair? One of the actions that was down was to bring an updated fraud strategy to the Audit Committee today. Is this an opportune moment to refer to that, Chair?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. Just to let the committee know that there's been a considerable amount of work that's gone on in terms of putting together a fraud strategy. Both Simon Roberts, who I think is here today, and Joan from Internal Audit have done some sterling work to get us to a point where we had a draft. But I have to admit to the committee that because of all the other things that we're having to deal with in terms of COVID and the NTFS, we haven't had an opportunity to polish it up sufficiently, I think, for it to be a public document and aired at the Audit Committee. So with your permission, Chair, I'll tender apologies to the Audit Committee and ask if we might bring that back in a more polished state for the next Audit Committee, and also consider the additional item that I think members would like, which was a training session on fraud at the same time. Audit Wales, I think, when we come to their item, may be able to bring something on NFI, and so it will all dovetail better into the next Audit Committee. But I do acknowledge that that we did say that a couple of things might just fall off the cliff because of resources, etc. So apologies to the committee.
Okay, thank you very much for that update, Jill, and it makes total sense to me to bring it back to the next meeting, and if we can have the Audit Wales update as well at that point, that would be great. So thank you very much. So if no other questions on the action record, can we move on to item number 5, which are the Audit Wales Audit Wales reports. And Jill, are you going to lead us into that, or is it straight to Sam?
I'm happy to continue.
Yes, I think go straight to Sam. Yeah.
Thank you, Sam.
That's okay, no problem. I just want to apologise because, again, I'm moving away from the Teams screen, so all I can see at the moment are the papers. So I'm sorry. So again, for the benefit of the recording, I'm Samantha Clements from Audit Wales, and I'm the Performance Audit Lead for the Council, responsible for the coordination and delivery of our Performance Audit Work Programme. So there are 3 items as per page 20 in the covering report that I'll be talking through today. The usual work programme update, the first annual audit summary, and the financial sustainability report. I will stop at the end of each item to provide the committee with opportunities to ask any questions. But I would also like to say at this point, I do apologise, but unfortunately none of my financial audit colleagues have been available to attend the meeting today, so I'm standing in, so please bear with me in that respect. So moving on to page 23. So here we have the financial audit update, and in terms of the audit of the Council's 1920 grants and returns, that work has been completed, and some minor amendments were necessary with one qualification letter. And the audit of the accounts, that's the 2021 statement of accounts, the planning work has commenced, and we aim to present the audit plan to the next audit committee. So turning over the page 24, this relates to the 1920 performance of work programme. This work will actually be drawn to a close today when I run through the annual audit summary. So all of this work I've already discussed. So if I could now move on to page 25. So this is the 2021 performance audit work programme. The main point here, there's actually an error. The annual audit summary, the dates are shown as June, July. That should actually be November and December, and I'll explain the change in that time frame later on. The next item, the assurance and risk assessment. This work it's not ongoing, although it is ongoing. It's always ongoing in the background. But in terms of drawing it to a conclusion for 2021, we intend to, or we have arranged a meeting with the Corporate Management Board on the 10th of February, and this discussion will inform. Oh, sorry, I'm going in and out of volume. I don't know what I can do about that. Sorry. So anyway,
put your mic in mic.
Sorry?
You can put your mic, in the mouthpiece. Just adjust that, please.
Oh, right. Okay. I'll try. Does that sound any better?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's as you move, Sam. It's as you move away from the computer to read.
Right. Okay. Sorry. Do I need to repeat anything?
No, I think we're okay so far. Thank you.
Okay, so the assurance and risk assessment, a meeting is scheduled on the 10th of February for us to discuss what we consider to be the key risks arising from our work throughout the year, and also with input from Exton and CIW. And the purpose and the output from that meeting will be the production of an audit plan. And the idea is that the Corporate Management Board can have some input into the presentation, so we leave the day with an agreed programme of work, and then we intend to take that to the next audit committee. Recovery planning work, that is still ongoing. Then financial sustainability, as you know, the last report from phase 1 was published in October of 2020 last year. The next piece of work is due to start fairly imminently. And the idea is that we will await for the final settlement, provide local feedback to the council, and then use and publish our findings in a national report this summer. Then over the page at 26, the digital review that is ongoing. We are about to draw our fieldwork to a close. So that fieldwork, that project is well underway. And the COVID-19 learning project, again, that's an ongoing piece of work. So over the page of 27, as usual, I scour our website for recently published reports, and I've attached here for the committee all of the relevant links just for ease of access, and hopefully they work. So at this point, please could I ask the committee for any questions?
Right. Are there any? Sorry, I'm just trying to. Mrs. Williams, would you like to ask your question, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask, in relation to the financial audit information, if you're able to confirm, Sam, when will the committee be receiving, if you could just remind me, when will we be receiving the result of the grants audit, please?
Williams, would you mind just muting just for the moment, please? Thank you. It's just we're getting a bit of feedback. If you could just put yourself, thank you very much.
I can take this question back. Unfortunately, it's difficult. My financial audit colleagues are absent at the moment. So can I provide you with an update.
Is that okay, Mrs. Williams, with you?
That's fine, thank you.
Chair, I can do
Thank you very much. Yes, Jill, did you want to have an update, please?
Yes, I can update if that would be helpful. And Deb and Nigel are both here, and they can add or correct me if I get it wrong. We've completed the grant claims, Mrs. Williams. Now the subsidy claim will go off this week. I've signed it, and we're just waiting now. I'm not sure whether Audit Wales have signed it, but it was in the process of being signed, so that will go off. So that completes the grants audit. I'm assuming that the Audit Wales will refer to it at the next audit committee, although I think we agreed because of the nature of the grant claims that we probably wouldn't have a separate grant claims report. We didn't have one last year, and I'm not aware that we're going to be having one this year. So we can certainly pick up in detail at the next audit committee, but the audit report that Sam refers to two claims that are qualified. One is the NDR claim and the other is a pooled budget, and they're for presentational issues more than anything. They're very, very minor, but as the bottom line has to be amended because of the way something was treated, then it becomes a qualification issue. So just to assure you, because I can see that if you didn't have any explanation, you may be wondering why those were qualified. And just to say that subject obviously to Audit Wales signing, then the housing benefit, the subsidy claim will also be qualified, again for some very minor amendments that I can bring back next time. But just to reassure you, a sort of £5 underpayment, a £70 overpayment is the sort of nature of the issues. So 75% of local authorities in Wales are likely to have a qualification for, as soon as you amend one of the cells, then it becomes a qualification. So just to reassure the audit committee, because I know you were very quite rightly exercised by the subsidy claim a couple of years ago, but I can reassure the committee that that it is quite a good news story in terms of our quality checking and the way in which we've identified some of the issues and errors as we've been going along. So if you want any more, I can go on, but just to give the committee some assurance that that there isn't a particular problem.
Thank you, Jill. Mrs. Williams, does that address your concerns for this meeting?
Yes, it does, very fully. Thank you very much, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. Just so that I don't get confused with anything else, Mrs. Williams, would you mind lowering your hand now, just so I don't have a, I don't think you've, thank you very much. So, Sam, can I come back to you for the rest of the report, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I'm just moving to the page. Okay, so yes, so item number 2, this is the first annual audit summary. We've been promising this, I know, since last November, but basically it's a composite report. It includes all the key elements of our predecessor documents, that's the annual improvement report and the annual audit letter. And we've presented it in such a way, just basically to make the information a bit more digestible and accessible, with the view to hopefully acquiring some interest from the public, from residents in Bridgend, and obviously for the purposes of the council. I don't propose to run through the report in any detail because it is basically a summary of everything that has gone before, but I will signpost to any key elements. So on page 30, we have just a summary here, I mean, key facts and some context, and then a summary of the Auditor General's duties that he relies upon, explained in simple terms for the purposes of this report. Then page 31, if I could draw your attention to the audit of the 1920 financial statements. And I can see here the Auditor General gave an unqualified, true and fair opinion on the financial statements, and they were signed on the 14th of September 2020. So that's the extract from the annual audit letter. Then on page 32, there's a summary here of all of our work from our programme from 1920, which is referred to in the previous item. And we've also attached just a high-level evaluative statement, and we've made reference to our WFG examination on the active Bridgend plan, our measure certificates, the last financial sustainability report from last year, and makes reference to the NFI report that Jill alluded to earlier, and we will definitely make provision to talk through this at the next committee. The next paragraph just makes reference to other regulators, so we do take into account all of the work that they produce during the year. And then over the page at 33, you'll just see again some reference to those local government study reports, the national reports that are published on our website, and I've just made reference really for completeness. And then over the page at 34, we have a list of the current projects that form part of our 2021 work programme. And again, I did make reference to these in the previous item. So I don't know, does anybody have any questions, please, Chair?
Thank you, Sam. Nobody's indicating they have any questions at this point. So if you want to carry on with the final bit, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So as I mentioned at the very beginning of my item, it is unfortunate that my financial audit colleagues were not available today. So I will do my best and focus on some of the key areas in the report for the committee. So in terms of the background, I mean, the work focusing on financial sustainability is part of an ongoing programme of work, as the committee is aware. It started because of the ongoing austerity across the UK, and that obviously has been continuing for 11 years. So we've considered financial sustainability to be a key risk for some time. And this was, like I just said, decided even before the pandemic, and we have reported periodically as committee will be aware. So this latest output, it's a fairly short report, again, a national piece of work, a public report for the benefit of residents and obviously council to understand the wider ramifications across Wales of the pandemic and austerity. And yes, so it's basically important for us to update the committee on this. So again, I hope you've all committee members have had some time to take a look at the report, but I'll just quickly draw the committee's attention to the summary report evaluations. So the first one around councils and Welsh Government have worked well together just to mitigate the impact of the pandemic in terms of close communication and understanding of the local issues. But again, I mean, the future sustainability of the sector is an ongoing challenge due to the uncertainty. And this against a backdrop of existing funding pressures.
Excuse me, Sam, your microphone slipped. Sorry,
oh,
thank you.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you very much.
I need to invest in a new pair of headphones, I think. So against a backdrop of existing funding pressures, financial costs of the pandemic and unprecedented issues as we go forward. Some councils we consider to be better placed financially than others to respond to these challenges, and within the report I think we show levels of reserves. They vary considerably, and you would expect that because of the size of councils, but we do highlight there that Bridgend I think is 7th out of the 22 authorities, so that does provide a healthy buffer going forward. The cost of the pandemic is obviously significant, and again we're just stressing the uncertainties because I know that Welsh Government have been pretty good in terms of reimbursing those additional costs and making provision for lost income, but going forward I think there are some uncertainties around that area. Yeah, so the financial challenges arising from debt are numerous and go well beyond the more immediate and obvious costs of responding to the crisis. And I think here we're touching on the impact on services. I mean, we don't really know yet what the increased demand on services is likely to be. The nature of that demand could become more complex, and this information is unknown at this stage. So I suppose at this point it's worth my saying we're about to start on phase 2 of our financial sustainability work from this year's programme, but there will be more work in 21-22. So at that point, could I ask for any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Does anybody have any questions, please? No. In the absence of any other questions, Sam, could I just make a comment observation, really, in that for me it would be more helpful if there could be some comment within the Audit Wales reports on some of the findings. So with the with this Bridgend being ranked as 7th with the reserves, again, there's no context there as to, or on any of the councils, there's just no context. And if we could have some context brought in so that anybody reading the report actually understands whether or not the view of the auditors are whether our reserves are at an appropriate level. Okay, is that okay? But thank you very much.
I'll take that back.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you very much for presenting the report and everything you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
So we'll now move. Can I? We now just need to note the report. Is everybody happy to note the report?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Altaf. So we'll now move on to agenda item number 6, which is the Treasury Management Strategy. That starts at page 53 on your pack. So if I can pass over to our Interim Financial Services Officer, Jill, to take us through this report, please.
Thank you, Chair. For the purposes of the recording, Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. And I'm going to ask Nigel Smith to take you through this.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Chair. For purposes of the recording, Nigel Smith, Interim Group Manager, Chief Accountant. The purpose of the report is to present to the committee the Council's draft Treasury Management Strategy 2021-22, which incorporates the borrowing and investment strategies 2021-22 and the Treasury Management Indicators for the period 2021-22 to 2023-24. Members will be aware that the Council's Treasury management activities are regulated by the Local Government Act, and the strategy is compiled in accordance with regulations, codes of practice and Welsh Government guidance. Whilst the content of the strategy is very much consistent to previous years that the members would have seen, I would like to draw focus to the key changes year on year. Section 2 of the strategy reflects the current economic background, and in particular the holding of interest rates by the Bank of England at 0.1%. Our Treasury Management Advisors, Arlene Close, view is that they expect this rate to remain the same until the first quarter of 2024. However, I think it's important to note that the impact of both the coronavirus pandemic and the exit from the European Union and future trade with the EU may well influence policy. So a further reduction to 0 or even negative rates cannot be ruled out in the future. Section 2 of the strategy sort of sets out the Council's debt and investment position as at the 31st of December 2020, and further detail on the maturity of the Council's long-term debt is set out on page 61 of the reports. I think this is a useful analysis for people to see sort of when our long-term debt matures in the future. Table 2, at the bottom of that page, sets out the Council's forecast need to borrow, taking into account the capital programme and reserves available in the short term to fund such expenditure. The use of reserves in the short term is prudent and cost effective, but as we use those reserves for the purposes they've been set aside for, the need to borrow would increase. It is important to note that the need to borrow, of course, will change dependent on the progress in the capital programme and the spending that will occur moving forward, and we'll monitor that closely throughout the year and amend that forecast as it changes. An important change to the terms of borrowing for the Public Works Loan Board, which is a primary source of borrowing for councils, is reflected on the second paragraph on page 64. The Section 151 officer will be required to certify that the council's capital programme does not include any intention to purchase investment assets primarily for financial reward for the current and next 2 financial years. This is irrespective of how that purchase might be financed or funded. So, for example, buying a property purely to benefit from the rental returns of capital appreciation wouldn't be supported. The PWLB would then not lend to us if we were to do that. That doesn't preclude us from purchasing things for service delivery, of course, that is still possible. Table 6 on page 68 reflects a change in the limit of investments that we're able to do into money market funds. Money market funds are a key tool for the council in investing cash resources, and especially when, for example, the funding we've had from Welsh Government in relation to COVID grants that we have then passed on to other organisations. We had increased in November, members might recall, the increase in total that we can invest in money market funds from 20 million to 30 million. But our Treasury Management advisors have now removed any limit in total. Of course, we wouldn't invest more than 6 million in one particular fund to ensure that we spread any potential risk. The next change at table 12 on page 74 of the pack is to increase the limit on lending to another entity from £1 million to £2 million. This is to support the proposed loan to a special purpose vehicle for the delivery of the Bridgend Town Heat network. Finally, there may be some changes to the figures within tables through the document to reflect the latest financial position just before it goes to Council in February. I'm happy to take any questions before the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Can I ask for that very clear report, and also particularly do like the new table showing the repayments. I think that's going to make things much easier for everybody to understand when things are being repaid or due to be repaid. So thank you. I can see Mrs. Williams, you have a question. Mrs. Williams, do you want to speak? Mrs. Williams, you'll need to unmute.
I realise that, yes, that's what's going slow.
Oh, right, sorry.
It's okay, it's okay. I just have a general question, really, and it's kind of linked to these financially strained times that we are in, and Jill may want to comment on this as well. It's up to you, but I'm just interested to know what do you think are there any key significant financial pressures coming from the continuing downward trend in the interest rate in terms of lost income, or indeed from those changes that Nigel just took us through in relation to borrowing from the PWLB? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Jill or Nigel, did you want to? Are you able to respond to that, please?
I'm sure Nigel will pick that up, but the interest rates have been pretty low for quite a long period of time now. But Nigel, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, I mean, we would have seen an impact if interest rates were to reduce. Of course, we would have a reduction in interest that we would receive. It's not necessarily the same for what we've got currently in borrowing, because our borrowing is currently at fixed term, so fixed interest rates. So we would see a drop off in interest received if rates were to reduce, but we would maintain the interest level we pay currently on our long-term borrowing. So there would be an impact. Let's say the forecast at the moment is that interest rates will remain stable at 0.1%. But the PWB has sort of in short-term investing with them had times when we've had, they've only offered negative rates. So we've tried to avoid that to ensure that we maximise the interest return to the council. And that's why things like the money market funds are crucial in that respect, so that we've got greater opportunities to maximise whatever interest we can get.
Thank you, Nigel. Mrs. Williams, does that clear that for you, or do you have any further questions on that?
Sorry. Sorry, Chair. This is just very difficult, I'm afraid. This.
Oh.
Everything is on go slow. I'm sorry. I don't.
Don't worry. Don't worry.
But in any case, no, that's fine. I think I'll leave it there. I mean, I was just interested as well in those those changes at the PWLB, but perhaps Nigel feels that he's covered that, or indeed that's not of any great significance. So I'll leave it there. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. I do have a question as well, please, and this is on page 74. The new loan limits with it up to £2 million in the non-treasury investments. My concern here is where it says a limit on loans to third parties, and the SPV is going to be set up for, I believe it's the Borough Council, to have to be running the SPV. I don't think we know how long the loan is outstanding for, or also what the dividend would be. And as such, I do query whether that should actually be under non-treasury investments. Could you update us on that, please?
Yes, I don't mind responding to that, Chair, if that's okay. I mean, there will be a financial plan associated with the heat network that, and there are reports, I believe, going to Council next month. I think it probably is a fair comment that it is a loan to a third party, albeit the SPV would be, we anticipate, wholly owned by the council. The loan is likely to be over quite a significant duration, potentially up to 40 years, which still has to be sort of finalised. So it may well not sit within the non-treasury investment section, and perhaps we should consider it on its own merit as a loan to third party section, separate to any investments. While we would expect to have interest repayable on it, it probably isn't a true investment in that sense.
Right. So could I ask that that's considered, that we look to possibly consideration be given to putting that into a separate section within the strategy, just so that there is absolute clarity on that. Is that all right?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you. If there are no further questions, could I have a mover for the report, please, and that we've considered and we can recommend the Treasury Management Strategy to Council?
No.
Thank you, Altaf.
Sorry, second it.
Thank you very much, Amanda. So as there's no further indications of anybody wanting to speak, can we move on to agenda item number 7, which starts at page 87 in your pack, and that's the corporate risk assessment, the risk management strategy and the incident reporting. Thank you. So if I could hand over to Jill, please, to take us through that report.
Okay, thank you, Chair. For the purposes of the recording, Interim Chief Officer, Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. What you've got in front of you here today is the Corporate Risk Framework. So you've got the Corporate Risk Register at Appendix A, the Corporate Risk Management Policy at Appendix B, and the Incident and Near Miss Occurrences at Appendix C. And I'm sure the Audit Committee will know very well that a good risk framework is integral to good governance, and it's also the responsibility of the Audit Committee to scrutinise the risk framework. So just by way of background, the corporate risk assessment is considered by CMB, SMT, and obviously the Governance and Audit Committee, and it forms part of the quarterly framework and informs the scrutiny programme as well. So it's really, really important. Oh, that's great. Sorry, my having told everybody about computer restarting, mine's going to restart, but I should get through this before it does. Integral to good governance and informs the scrutiny programme. So what you have in front of you here, the 21-22 corporate risk assessment is in draft for the Audit Committee to scrutinise. It is aligned to the MTFS, as you'll be aware, and will go to Council as part of the MTFS package at the end of February. So if I could draw your attention in the covering report to 4.2, because I think this needs some explanation. Because you may look at the corporate risk register as the audit committee and think that there's not enough in there about the emergency situation and the COVID situation. So whilst the CRA is continuously reviewed, there's obviously, as you well appreciate, some really fluid and dynamic issues that we're dealing with at the moment in the council. And they can change on not just a day-to-day basis, but an hour-to-hour basis. And you think of the PPE situation, TTP, all these acronyms that probably nobody really heard of a year ago. But they are constantly changing. The vaccination programme, we've got redeployment of staff. And I think it's really important that we understand that we wouldn't be able to update the corporate risk register every single hour of every day. So what we do have is sitting alongside the corporate risk register, various other governance frameworks that I know we will want to bring into the annual governance statement at the end of the year. So there's been an increased focus on health and safety and safeguarding. But this is through our current management processes, and it's embedded in our practices. So on every agenda for CMB and for CCMB, there's a standing item of safeguarding. So, so those are the sort of mechanisms for escalation at the moment, because obviously we've had such an increased focus on those areas. I also sort of want to draw attention to the sort of issues that would be put on what we call a SITREP, and these would appear probably on the Directorate risk plans, unless they were of sufficient importance, obviously, to make it through to the corporate risk register on an ongoing basis. So some of these come and go and are very fluid. So at the moment, we're in the middle of a very, very serious care homes, obviously emergency situation. PPE is not quite as challenging as it was at the beginning of the pandemic. So rather than change the risk register every week, there's a weekly SITREP, and that's a situation report. It's another acronym that we probably hadn't all come across before, and that's submitted to the local resilience forum, and each directorate contributes to that. So you would have TTP on there at the moment, the homeless situation, social care, schools, those sort of issues, and they're reported on a regional basis. So there's a much better what I call emergency planning framework around those risks. So there's also additional corporate governance measures that have been put in place. At the beginning of the pandemic, we had daily gold meetings as CCMB. Those were stood down, obviously, and we now have a CMB Gold meeting every Friday, which concentrates on the COVID risks. So our normal CMB meeting would take the corporate risk register. Our Gold meeting will look specifically at what I call these fluid and dynamic emergency situations that we have to respond to quickly. So what I think I'm telling the Audit Committee in many respects is that rather than duplicate and waste a huge amount of time trying to update the corporate risk register, all these things sit alongside, and as I say, they will come and go. They won't necessarily endure. So alongside the gold, a silver group has been set up, and that's mainly heads of service, and that group considers and makes recommendations to CMB Gold, CCMB, or both. The Council's obviously experiencing immense pressure across the authority at the moment. Obviously a huge, well, not a huge amount, but significant numbers of staff being redeployed to bolster resources on all these emergency areas. So we've updated the corporate risk register, which you'll be used to receiving at this audit committee. But obviously I wanted to draw your attention to the fact that there were these other governance frameworks as well, which obviously the Audit Committee will be particularly interested in. So each year you have an opportunity obviously to review and approve the risk policy that sets the framework. That's one of the documents that you have in front of you today. That policy includes the definition of risk, strategy, accountabilities, setting the Council's risk appetite, measuring risk, etc. And on the back of that, there's two appendices. One gives you the insurance strategy, and the second one, the risk management timetable that, again, the Audit Committee will be familiar with. And Appendix C, which we've taken for the first time last year, and it's in front of you again today, is the incident and near miss record. And I think as a council, we're still, I think it's fair to say, struggling a little bit with getting this embedded, because I think people naturally record health and safety issues, but don't necessarily naturally record these. And I think there's still an element of confusion. So I think we're going to have to give this a little bit more thought in terms of how much use it is as it currently is, whether it should perhaps be aligned to health and safety, therefore to encourage more learning, or whether we consider any other alternative method. So that was really all I wanted to say, Chair. Fran Mantle is also here today, who's responsible, along with Nigel, for delivering this to you today. So happy to take any questions that you or the committee might have. And if I disappear, I will be back within a couple of minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jill, for taking us through the report. So I can see, first of all, Councillor Pam Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with everything that Jill is saying. The health and safety, I think sometimes we forget part of that health and safety is also the well-being of staff. And that is a very important feature. We all think about the Health and Safety Act, but that well-being covers a multitude of sins. And I know that we are putting staff in areas where maybe they haven't been before, and risk assessments are paramount. I just wondered how many were actually being redeployed to vaccinate. Have we got any? And are they having the vaccination themselves? Because you're seeing hundreds going through, and maybe hundreds a day. So they are putting themselves at risk as well by giving the COVID vaccine. But I think we need to get over to staff that well-being word is equally as important as the other health and safety. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Pam. Jill, did you want to come back on that?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Davis. All good points. I'll try and answer them as best I can. as you'll appreciate, there's a massive amount that's gone into employee well-being over the duration of COVID. You can never, I guess, do enough, and people are affected in all sorts of different ways. There's a lot on the intranet in terms of help and things that can help with people's well-being. And there are also a lot of courses for managers about managing remotely, because that's quite a different world as well. So I think well-being, and it's also on the CNB agenda probably every week in terms of employee well-being. So there's a huge amount, just to reassure you. And I'm sure if you wanted more information, Debbie can give you that. But there is a lot ongoing. In terms of redeployment, yes, we are looking, and this is a very fluid situation, and I said that things change by the hour, and I think probably TTP in this one has been the best examples, and there will be those who will be redeployed and moved over to help with the vaccination programme. I wouldn't go as far as to say that they will definitely be given the vaccine, but I think it's very possible that as part of their redeployments that they will. But I wouldn't want to swear to that. It's a very sensitive subject about who gets it and who doesn't. So, but my understanding is that once they've done the 2 days, I think it's a day and a half, 2 days training, then that's very possible. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Jill. Is that okay, Pam, or did you have any other questions on that?
No, not really. I think that it's imperative. It's like the teachers really with the children, isn't it? And we don't know how quick this extra strain is going to spread, etc. Only what we're hearing in the press. And I think that to put people and redeploy them into areas where they're not going to have only masks, etc., the same as the rest of us. They really do need that extra protection, because they are, they're setting themselves up for a fall there. And I wouldn't want our numbers to go up, because then the vaccinators are going to be affected, and that's going to show in the numbers that are, the actual people that come in to be vaccinated. But thank you, Jill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jill, you've raised your hand again.
Yes.
So.
Just to come back to just reassure members of the Audit Committee that at the moment this is on a voluntary basis, so people are volunteering to be moved across. We haven't actually at this point in time needed to actually say that people have to. So this is on a voluntary basis.
Thank you for that clarity, Jill. Mrs. Williams, you've got your hand up for a question.
Mm-hmm. Hello, Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you now. Thank you, Mrs. Williams.
Right, sorry, I'm flitting between screens as well as having a lot of difficulty with speed. I just want to raise, well, two questions, or one point first of all. Thank you so much to Jill Lewis for giving us the information there about the additional tools, additional measures that are happening on an hourly basis, indeed, which is entirely understandable. And totally agree that you cannot possibly be expected to be updating a risk register on such a basis. However, what I would suggest is perhaps could we, as the Audit Committee, get I don't know, maybe an appendix, something, a 1 page, that's all, just to summarize those measures, those mechanisms on a quarterly basis. Could we get that, please? Just just a 1 page appendix to come to us with the risk register update that just summarizes those mechanisms and any further points you want to make regarding them, because possibly you will be not only will some of them be becoming or some of the issues that they're handling get resolved, but also you may be adding new tools to that framework and to those additional measures that you've been taking. So that's a suggestion for you to think about. So that whilst I very much appreciate your oral update on that today, and it's very reassuring, perhaps as we go forward, because we're not out of this yet, are we? This is going to go on, and so that's my suggestion on that. On a specific risk, I would like to just mention a concern I have regarding risk number 2, and that talks about the difficulties of the council in achieving transformation, including financial savings. And then the rest of the table, the rest of the register talks about the difficulties in having changes to ways of working for staff. And it talks quite a bit about staff there, and then it goes on to talk about some of the mitigations that are happening. But the most concerning thing, perhaps to me, one of the things that's concerning me about this is the way the score has been reduced. The score has been reduced from 16 to 4. You know, that's it has been reduced to a quarter of its initial risk level, and the residual risk is being quoted at 4. I do find that difficult to understand why such a change, and I can't see the evidence in the actions there or anything in the register to assure me that reduction is legitimate. And then I would also add that there does seem to be this concentration on ways of working, staff. But you know, the financial savings and the threat to their achievement is about more than just our staff. There are other factors, and particularly this climate we're in now with the pandemic. There are many other obstacles to achieving financial savings than just the human resources of the organisation. Okay, so I would like you to just, because of the technology here, I don't think it's reasonable to be expecting long conversations. So, I don't need a huge long answer to this today, but I would like you to consider changing it, and particularly though, to reconsider the reduction in the residual risk score. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Now, I know that Jill has fallen off the call because her computer has just rebooted. So, Fran, I don't know whether you've got any information that would give some background to why the score has come down just as much, both on likelihood and on impact. Please.
Thank you, Chair. For the purpose of the recording, Frances Mantle, Finance and Governance Exchequer Manager. Thank you, Mrs. Williams, for raising those two concerns. At this point, I can't expand on them, but I will definitely take them back to the group to review both the risk and also to expand on the actions, as you say, with regards to financial savings, which should be more than just looking at staff. So I will take on board both those questions and come back to the next meeting with an updated risk register in response to those questions.
Thank you, Frances. That's lovely. Is that okay, Mrs. Williams? I'll take silence as nothing else. Are there any other questions? So Jill is now back on the call. So are there any other questions on the risk register, please? No, I do have a couple of observations on the risk register. On risk number 6, we have an old historic action about the prison, HMP, and the review date was for March last year. So I'm wondering, as that action has now been delivered, whether that should actually come off, so we've just got the current actions left on rather than old historic actions. And then there's two specific school risks that are at the bottom of the risk register, risks number 14 and 15. And I know that they haven't been assessed yet on the raw risk rating and the net risk rating. But there's nothing there to indicate that these are COVID-related risks. So I do have a question as to, firstly, are they COVID-related risks for schools or not? And secondly, on risk number 15, I would have thought that the consequences of that particular risk are the impact on the life prospects of students, as opposed to schools meeting the standards, because it's the consequences for the pupils as to whether they're going to get the educational input that they deserve. So I don't know whether Jill or Francis is able to come back on that one, please.
Okay, I think we probably need to take those away, Chair, to discuss with Lindsay and look at how we explain those. I think they're points well made. Then they're not necessarily, the second one is more linked to COVID and probably should be explained as such. The first one that you raised in terms of the loss of senior leaders, I think is wider than just COVID. So I'll take those back to Lindsay to discuss and come back to the audit committee with some revisions.
Thank you very much, Jill. So if there's no other questions or no other comments on this item, could I have a mover and seconder, please, to say that we've considered the corporate risk assessment and the risk policy, and we've noted the instant and near miss update.
Move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you very much. So we're now moving on to agenda item number 8. Which is the progress on the internal audit plan, which starts at page 115 in your pack, and I'll hand over to Joan, who I believe will be taking us through this report. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. This is Joan Davis, Audit Client Manager. The report in your pack is the progress against the internal audit risk-based plan for the period 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of December 2020. It's our regular update to show the progress. It is recognised that some service areas are under intense pressure at the moment, and where possible, we do try to accommodate any of these strains within our audit work and rearrange them to accommodate any service pressures. However, it's pleasing that we are progressing the plan well. On page 119, Appendix A, you can see that as of the date, the 31st of December, we had completed 12 audits with an opinion. 3 audits were still out in draft, 15 pieces of work were ongoing, and 5 had been allocated and were due to start. To date, 16 medium recommendations have been made and none have been graded as high priority, which is very pleasing. So therefore, since the last meeting, no major concerns have been identified, and any reports that have been closed during that period have been closed with a reasonable audit opinion. We've also made recommendations. 16 medium recommendations have been made. Again, none have been high priority, and we will follow up those recommendations as per our usual process. You will also see at Appendix A that most of the work has been allocated. There's an exception of 3 pieces of work there that have yet to be allocated and may slip depending on the workload in the next quarter. These are procurement, looked after children, and GDPR. As far as procurement is concerned, however, there has been coverage throughout the plan on other pieces of work. There's been a piece of work completed recently on purchasing cards, and procurement is picked up on contract pieces of work that we're undertaking. Looked after children has slipped, but that's due to the pressure on the service at the moment. And as far as GDPR is concerned, we undertook quite a large piece of work in last financial year and a follow-up. So if that did slip, it would be picked up next year, but we don't see that as a great concern at this time. Therefore, it appears that at this present moment in time, there will be sufficient coverage by the end of the year to form an audit opinion. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Joan. That's lovely. Can I ask if anybody has any questions for Joan, please? No. Okay then. Well, thank you very much, Joan. If I can have agreement that we have noted the report and the recommendations. Thank you.
No.
Thank you, Altaf.
Second. Thanks.
Thank you, Amanda. So we're now moving on to item number 9, and this is the Audit Committee self-assessment, which starts at page 123 of your pack. And if I can ask Mark to take us through this, please.
Yes, certainly, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. For the purpose of the recording, is Mark Thomas, Head of the Regional Internal Audit Service. Yes, as the Chair referred, this report is on page 123 of your pack. The purpose of the report is to summarise for members of the committee the draft findings of the self-assessment of good practice from the SIPFA Audit Committee's practical guidance checklist. So, in line with the forward work programme, Internal Audit have undertaken a piece of work to work through the self-assessment checklist to basically make sure that the committee is undertaking the tasks that it needs to undertake, essentially. If I refer you to paragraph 3.2, that sets out what we've done in terms of providing a high-level review that incorporates the key principles set out in SIPFA's position statement. Paragraph 4.1 there refers to the draft completed checklist and its findings in Appendix A to this report. And this is very much an opportunity for members to feed into that piece of work. So there's an opportunity for you to have a look at the questions that we've answered to the best of our ability to make sure you're happy with the conclusions that we've reached. So we're able to conclude the piece of work. What we've done by undertaking this piece of work, we've identified some areas for consideration for taking forward, and they set out in paragraph 4.2 under a series of bullet points, and I'll go through those now. The production of an annual report on the work of the committee, including obtaining feedback on its performance, that's an area for consideration. To update the terms of reference for the committee to reflect clearly the purpose in accordance with SIPFA's position statement. There were a couple of little areas that weren't specifically mentioned, including governance and collaboration arrangements and ethical framework. And the other thing that we will need to take into consideration very shortly is to reflect the changes in legislation set out in the Local Government and Elections Wales Bill that received royal assent from last week. So there are some changes there to the role of the committee. The title of the committee is obviously already changed to reflect what was coming, but there are a number of other changes, including increasing the number of lay members sitting on the committee, and also a lay member being required to chair the committee. The other points that we've identified is that the training needs assessment for members be worthwhile to be undertaken, and also feedback is sought from those relying on the committee's work, and that could be fed into an annual report if that's an agreed way forward, as the committee evaluating whether and how it is adding value, and an action plan is put in place to improve any identified areas of weakness. The recommendations for the areas identified are made in Appendix B of this particular report, and also attached for consideration in Appendix C is a member skills and knowledge questionnaire that we may consider sending out to members if members agree, to be able to identify perhaps any areas that you feel that you could benefit from some additional training and supporting, and we can factor that into a training programme. I should mention that we've trialled this questionnaire with another authority in Rhondda Cynon Taf before Christmas, and the feedback was that there was a very straightforward questionnaire and useful questionnaire to complete, and that's a similar exercise we've done there already, and will be likely to be taken forward in the other authorities as well. So happy to take any questions or any comments so we can reflect any members' views on the questionnaire or any of the issues that we've raised in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Can I ask if anybody has any questions, please? Tom, Councillor Tom Beadle, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just point of interest as regards to the increase of membership of this panel with regards to lay members, and I think it was mentioned that possibly the chair could be a lay member also. So that given that, does that mean that we forego elections by the committee for the chair, or is it that they actually take part in the election for chair the same as every other member of the panel?
Can I pass that over to you, Mark?
Yes, certainly, Chair. I'll do my best to answer. I think some of the details surrounding this is yet to be worked through in reality. The expected date for implementing the change of membership, as far as we know at the moment, is likely to be April 2022. So it's over a year away, but nevertheless that we need to make preparations for it. In terms of the mechanics of electing the chair, I would assume, but we'll have to take advice from the monitoring officer on this, that the committee would still vote for a chair, but it would need to be a lay member. That's what I would expect. But as I say, we'd have to work through the detail and understand the correct process to be gone through. So it's a very good question, and yes, I'm not sure if anybody's got a straight answer, but that's what I think will happen.
Thank you, Mark. Is that okay, Tom?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's something that we need to work out, that's for sure.
Lovely, thank you. Mrs. Williams, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and my mic is on all the time now for some reason. I don't know why. Yes, I just want to clarify with Mark. I noticed the the requirement of the committee for this report is to consider it and consider the. I'm sorry, it's not in front of me anymore, so I can't quote it. But anyway, can you just clarify the recommendation for the committee, that particular item? I've got no problem with the second bit about filling in the self-assessment questionnaire. That's fine. But I'm just wondering, what is the timing of this today now? I mean, are you asking us to what are you asking us to do today? Perhaps that's the best way to ask the question. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, recommendation 9.1 is that members of the committee consider the findings in the checklist and the recommendations made. So really what I was suggesting is that if there are any points in the report or in the checklist that members want to flag up or to make any additional comments on, we can take that into consideration in terms of finalising this piece of work, because it's the appendix is the draft sort of word in the background running through it, because it's obviously not finalised until you've all had an opportunity to make any comment, really. So if you've got any comments now, they're obviously gratefully received, but if members would prefer to have a couple of weeks to sort of look at what's in the report and then come back with comments, that would be equally acceptable. And then as Mrs. Williams mentioned, 9.2, it was basically for members, if they're happy to agree, to complete the skills self-assessment questionnaire, which we will email out separately to members to complete, again given a reasonable time, well, two weeks or something like that, 2 to 3 weeks to complete, and then we can analyse the results of the questionnaire. Obviously the feedback will be anonymised, but it's just to give a feel for really where members feel they could do with some additional training and support in terms of the functions of the committee and the skills that audit committee members are expected to have, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Mrs. Williams, did you want to come back on that?
Yes, please, if I could.
Please do. And then after that, I'll bring Jill in.
Sorry, I'm very sorry about this, but I have no control over the technology, unfortunately. Can you hear me now?
Yep, can hear you now, Mrs. Williams.
Okay, I think on 9.1 then, I mean, I would appreciate a little bit more time. So if Mark's suggestion around the 2 to 3 weeks to consider, that would be very helpful personally. But obviously it's up to the committee to either agree with me or not. Thank you.
Thank you. So with Jill, do you want to come in first, and then we can ask the committee about from a timing perspective?
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Chair. Obviously I discussed this with Mark and Joan, and I've seen this sort of analysis of audit committee effectiveness and training done so many times over the years in different forms, and there isn't any right or wrong way to do it. And Mark and I did talk about obviously getting views anonymously and independently first. Some committees do it that way, so you have an opportunity to feed comments in and then discuss that at the audit committee. But in truth, there's really no substitution for the committee themselves, not in an open session, but perhaps in a separate session, discussing how you feel the committee's going, so that you can have that honest debate that isn't in a sort of controlled public meeting way. So one of the suggestions I would make is that I don't know whether this is possible, and it may be just small groups if it's too complicated to organise the whole committee, and I know time pressures make that difficult sometimes, but there's no substitute really for me for a discussion, an open, honest discussion about what works well, what doesn't work so well, what do people feel? Do they feel they're equipped to do the job? So that's the bit about training and development. Do you feel that you're able to offer questions easily, those sort of things, and have you, do you get the papers adequate to enable you to do that, and all those sort of things. So I find that they're quite hard to do in a very short space of time. You kind of need to just sit around and debate it. I know we're sitting around in a different way at the moment, and it's much more difficult sometimes than just perhaps all meeting before the committee meeting or all meeting after. But that's the sort of thing I would suggest, so that nobody feels sort of that they can't speak out. So
yeah, I think that's a very good suggestion. And Richard, Councillor Granville, you've put your hand up, so can I take your comments first of all, please?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just apologise for being late to the meeting?
Yeah.
Due to work, obviously. One of the things I think that we need to perhaps look at as a committee is the agenda items that we discuss. Sometimes I feel that the agenda is too long and we don't have enough time then to debate individual things, right? We're pressured into moving on too quick. And what Thomas has just said about individuals having learning stuff, I think it's too late for this committee this time, because we've only got 15 months left. I think it is more pragmatic for the new committee. So when the new committee is set up, I think we should go through a tranche of going through practical work with Jill and Thomas, or whoever is going to facilitate doing the bits and pieces that we need to look at, and how to look at things. You know what I mean? Sometimes you look at something and you don't understand it, or phrasing, or different things. So that's the way I'm looking at it anyway, Chair. Okay,
thank you for those comments. I know that if we did have, for my view for this committee and for training, is that we still have 15 months where we do need to add value to the council. And if we and some members of this committee may well be on the audit committee in the next, after our local elections. So I think if people do feel they need some training, that if we have the opportunity of getting it done, my personal view is that we should take it. But of course, that is for individuals and for them to be available at those times. So that's my personal view about training. On the agendas, it could be that if we shortened the agendas, we would have to have more meetings, and that would be fitting that into the diary and also with the officers. So that's something that we would have to look at. The next person is Councillor Paul Davis, please.
Sorry, Chair, I'm just opening the mic. Chair, I don't know if you recall, I was brought onto this committee not from day one, after we was elected, but after a year or two. I can't remember exactly how long. I think then the very first thing I said in the meetings was, that the training is needed because there's some of this stuff, and I'm no maths genius, you know what I mean. It is difficult, you know what I mean, and to be effective, and I said that I think it was 2 years ago now. I think I came on the committee, and I said it then, and here we are today, still discussing it basically, It's not a criticism, it's just the way it is, isn't it, So
okay, so you would support some training?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I asked for it the very first meeting I came on, if you remember. It might be minuted, I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Tom Beadle.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Interesting point here on self-assessment. It's more like a skills audit, but I think that the important factor to remember here is that we here as a political we are proportionately here as a political makeup of the council, and that's an interesting point. So that possibly that it's an issue for group leaders to be involved as regards to skills assessment of individuals to sit on this committee, and unfortunately that's a task I don't think they particularly want to undertake. But I know that we've done skills audits and self-assessment in the past, but it's validating those audits and assessments. I mean, that's the important factor for me, because I've been involved many times, and I've seen many written self-assessments, but as regards to ratifying the validity of those, it's something totally different. But I do emphasise the point as regards to the political makeup of this committee, that they should be putting an onus onto group leaders as regards to identification of members for this committee.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Mrs. Williams, did you have a comment? So I didn't know if it's a legacy hand or if it's a new point. Your microphone is switched on, Mrs. Williams.
Not as far as I can see, but you're telling me it is. That's fine.
Yeah. You
can hear me? Well,
yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. We're getting completely different messages. Okay. No, sorry, that was a legacy hand. Apologies.
No problem. Thank you. Okay. So from the discussions. First of all, well, Mark, did you want to come back on anything first of all?
Perhaps, yeah, if I can just comment. I think, some valid points made by all members, really. And I think going back to what Jill said, there's no absolute right and wrong way of doing this. There's different ways, and it, certainly there's no substitute for being able to sit around a table and discuss some of these things. Obviously, it's a bit more difficult in the age that we work in at the moment with the electronic sort of media. One of the things I have seen in some audit committees is a standing agenda item, sort of reflection and evaluation of the meeting. So that may be something for consideration. It's not a recommendation that we've made, but that may allow a bit of discussion and reflection on, okay, how did that meeting go? You know, what in terms of the types of items or the length of the items, that sort of thing. But that's something for wider consideration. In terms of the checklist, the checklist that we've worked through is based on the SIP for guidance for audit committees. So that's what the professional body, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, see as what should be in place for audit committees in local government. So we have identified some things there that perhaps ought to be considered for making those improvements. They're not big things, but they are things to consider. In terms of the skills of members, I tend to agree with the members who've said that, you know, it's always worthwhile in having training. I take on board that there's 15 months or so ago, but again, as I think you may have said, Chair, the likelihood is, depending on many people choose to stand or step down and so on, there's likelihood to be similar. A number of the members are likely to be still on the audit committee, I would guess, and as the number of lay members increases, my understanding is that was part of the Welsh Government thinking, is that when they are recruited, you would look for people with a certain level of experience and skills that would be complementary to the role of a governance and audit committee. So hopefully that would assist as well. But my take on it is, you know, I think it would be worthwhile to send out the questionnaire and see what comes back, and then maybe we can. It might be sort of 2, 3 or 4 things that we could factor in over the forthcoming maybe 12 months in terms of training and support for members. Some of the other areas we've identified that you know, for consideration, if the committee is happy with the points that we've raised, it may need to be discussed within the authority, say with the monitoring officer, for example, because it may involve having to change the constitution. So yeah, I think there's merit in taking some things forward, but there's also merit in exactly what Jill said of doing it in a different way. So whether we do that now or do that maybe later, further down the line, you know, I'm perfectly happy with whichever way the committee wants to take things forward. Okay,
so we thank you very much, Mark. So we had a suggestion from Jill around, well, we had Mrs. Williams first of all asked if we could have some additional time to individually look through the self-assessment and then feedback comments. And we also had a suggestion from Jill that sometimes it can be helpful to sit around a virtual or sit around a table to discuss it. Can I ask if I put made various meetings available, virtual meetings available over a period of, I don't know, 2 weeks at different times, so that members had the opportunity of having that virtual round the table discussion on the self-assessment. Is that something that members on the committee would appreciate and think is a good idea? If you think that is a good idea, if you could put a hand up in your box. If you would rather do it independently and feed the self-assessment comments back individually, can you keep your hand down in the comment box? So if you can either put your hands up and so, right. Okay, so 2 councillors would like to have a round the table discussion on the self-assessment for the committee, and everybody else wants to do it separately. So what I will do is I will set up meetings to have with definitely the 2 councillors who have indicated they would like that, but I will make those times available to everybody. So if anybody else does want to join us, they can do so. And then we just need to agree a time frame for people to come back with their comments on the assurance framework. Sorry, not on the self-assessment. So if and also the training suggestions. So if we could set a deadline, would 3 weeks be acceptable to everybody? So that would take us up to, let me just check. Sorry, just trying to find a calendar. So that would take us up to, if we said by the close of business on Friday, the 19th of February, would that be acceptable to everybody? Could I have a show of hands in the...
Fine by me, Chair.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Great.
Yeah,
okay.
fine.
Thank you very much. So I will sort out some meeting requests. I may need some help from Democratic Services on setting up meetings on Teams, but I'll get that sorted, and then we can move. We should be able to feed all of that information back. Sorry. Oh, Councillor Davis. Yes, what we have. Thanks for letting me know you're back. What we had, we've just been discussing the self-assessment and the training. Analysis, and what we have agreed is that some councillors would like to fill in the self-assessment or consider the self-assessment individually and feed that back, while others would like to have a virtual round-the-table discussion. So I will be sending out meeting requests to everybody for some different sessions on how for us to debate the self-assessment, and people can join that if they wish, and then others will feed back by the Friday, the 19th of February. Okay?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry to hold up the procedure with everybody else, but these computers always go off at the most inconvenient time.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody, for that, and Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Pam. So can we agree that we have considered the checklist, and we have agreed to complete the skills analysis? Is that all right, everybody?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll now move on to agenda number 10, which is the external funding internal audit report, which starts at page 139 of your pack. And Mark, I will hand over to you for this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, basically, as the Chair said, the report starts on page 139 of the pack. The purpose of the report is to present to members of the committee a recently issued internal audit report, which reviewed a sample of externally funded schemes in order to provide assurance in respect of the procurement and governance aspects of those schemes. As members will be aware, internal audit don't usually present individual reports to audit committee, particularly when there's a positive opinion is given. You obviously get updates through the regular reports that we present to our audit committee on reports that we've produced. But members may be aware and recollect that the Chief Executive presented a report on the Audit programme to Cabinet on the 17th of November 2020. Within that report, reference was made to work being undertaken by internal audit, which aimed to provide assurance that the procurement and governance aspects of externally funded schemes were compliant with council policies, as well as any specific grant terms and conditions. And that report that was presented to Cabinet informed Cabinet that the completed audit report would be presented to the Governance and Audit Committee. So basically, just by way of a little bit of background there, why the report is being brought to you today. So if I just refer you to paragraph 3.1, an internal audit review of the external funding was undertaken as part of the 2021 annual internal audit plan, and the objective of the review is set out there, as I've already referred to. In section 4 of the report, the completed internal audit report is attached at Appendix A, so you've got the full copy of the report in Appendix A. And as identified in Table 1 in that report on page 146 of the papers, the report identifies the 10 schemes that we reviewed and the findings and recommendations made as a result of that work. It was found from the sample selected and reviewed, the concerns arising from a previously externally funded scheme have not been replicated. So I think that's very good news. Documentation was available to support compliance with the Council's contract procedure rules and the involvement of corporate procurement when engaging contractors. There was also evidence of supplier monitoring, reporting and governance across all of those projects that we looked at. We've given an audit opinion of reasonable assurance in relation to this piece of work, and that is that key controls exist, but there may be some inconsistency in application. However, we only made 4 minor merits attention recommendations, so there was nothing fundamentally wrong. And as I said, the procedures that we would expect to have been followed were followed for those 10 projects and examples that we looked at. So as I said, I think that's good news. It gives assurance to the committee, but both myself and Joan are happy to take any questions on the detail in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mark. I can see Mrs. Williams has a question.
Can you hear me at all?
Yes, we can hear you, thanks.
Okay, I'm still unmuted according to my screen, or I'm still muted rather according to my screen. Yes, I just want to ask, I don't have any, specific questions on the report itself, Mark, but I wanted to know, are you now going to be, or is there anything, and I haven't seen it, so, and please forgive me if I've missed it, are there plans, or is there any plan longer term for you to carry out such work as you have in relation to these schemes? Is there any longer term plan for internal audit reviews to be carried out on external funding?
We've got time in the plan to look at various aspects of procurement and particular projects. I think Joan will have touched on those a little bit earlier. So they are matters that we do look at on a periodic basis, in conjunction with other reviews that we undertake. So to try and answer your question, yes, we have done, and yes, we will continue to look at different projects as well.
Okay, thank you. That's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions on this report? No, I have a couple of questions, if I may, Mark, please. So with the reviews that were undertaken, were any of the others on a time limited or late funding as per we understood that was one of the reasons for the RBED report, the RBED funding? That was the first question. And then actually the second question is probably more to Jill. So if I could ask you that on the first question, please.
Certainly, Chair. I'm sure Joan will come in to fill in some of the gaps as well. We did try and identify schemes where there was later funding. It's not always that easy to identify when you're looking at the sample. So the only example that we came across was to do with the bridge strengthening work, but that basically was additional funding that the council had applied for because extra funding was required, and basically the appropriate procurement activities had already been undertaken for that scheme in any event. But I'm sure, Joan, you may have some more information to add to that. So if I could ask Joan to supplement what I've said.
Yes, certainly. Joan Davis, Audit Client Manager. Yeah, if I just want to add to what Mark has said, he is right. Within the 10 schemes that we selected, we managed to find one where there was late allocation. It was difficult to find any. So the one that we did find was the Active Travel Pencoed Technology Park project. But as Mark said, that was slightly different. They had identified unforeseen works and actually bid for the extra funding themselves rather than it being allocated to them. However, we've been speaking to the finance team as well, and it appears that one of the reasons why we had difficulty identifying anything where the funding was so late is because Welsh Government now build into their terms and conditions more flexibility. So if money was given to them quite late on in the financial year, there's flexibility to allocate that funding at a later date. There's within the terms and conditions. So I think again that provides assurance that the situation that happened a few years ago probably wouldn't happen so much now, because those terms and conditions allow money to be not the rush to be spent by the 31st of March. There's provision to deal with the finances in a different way.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Joan. And
Okay.
Jill, you wanted to come in.
Yes, sorry, Chair. I should have waited really for you to ask the question, and I could have picked that up. But it was just as Joan was talking, I thought it was important that I just raised the issue of late funding, because increasingly there's a number of hypothecated grants that come through quite late in the year, and some with some immediacy about them. And we've had to do quite a lot of substitution, where Joan says that the terms and conditions are much less challenging. They are these days. Increasingly, Welsh Government are recognising that making the terms and conditions very stringent put councils in a very difficult position in terms of the ability to comply with contract procedure rules, etc. So increasingly they're allowing us to substitute what's currently, particularly if it's a capital programme, what's currently being spent, and therefore being able to carry it forward, so that there is a greater understanding, I think, from the Welsh Government point of view on this now.
Thank you, Jill. And I've just realised that actually the question I was going to ask wasn't actually relevant to this paper, so I don't need to ask that. So thank you very much. Can I have, as there doesn't appear to be any further questions on this, can I have agreement that we have noted, we've read the report and noted the findings?
Move.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we now move on to agenda item 11, which is the updated work programme, which starts on page 155 of your pack. And if I can hand over to Jill to take us through this report, please. Thank you.
Could I ask Deborah, who's here, Deborah Exton, to take us through this, Chair?
Of course, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jill. For the recording, it's Deborah Exton, Interim Deputy Head of Finance. As you know, this is a standing item on the agenda at every meeting. It's the proposed updated forward work programme for the remainder of the year. This is the last one for this municipal year, and it sets out the proposed agenda items for the meeting to be held on the 22nd of April. Section 3 of the report gives a summary of the key functions of the Governance and Audit Committee. And as you can see from the bullet points there, they include the consideration of reports, both from internal and external auditors and other officers, review of financial statements, and consideration of the effectiveness of risk management arrangements in the council. So to enable the Governance and Audit Committee to do this, we present a forward work programme for members to consider, and to give you the opportunity to either ask for additional items to be included or to invite specific officers. So the table in section 4.1 gives a breakdown of those items due to come to the next meeting. But as Jill's already referred to earlier on, the report on the fraud risk assessment and the strategy will be presented at the next meeting too, as will an update from Audit Wales on the National Fraud Initiative. So they were too late to actually include in this report, but they will be there on the agenda for the next meeting. Also at the next meeting, we'll bring a proposed forward work programme for the 2021-22 year, and obviously give members an opportunity to consider that and determine the frequency of the reports and when they'll be presented to the committee. So just moving to the recommendations that the committee consider and approve the updated forward work programme for 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deb. Does anybody have any questions on the update on the forward work programme? So can I have a mover that we have considered and approved the recommendations, please?
No.
Thank you, Altaf. Thank you very much. So I haven't been advised of any urgent items. So I'd like to before we close, just like to thank all of the officers and everybody, all of the councillors and everybody on the call, our Audit Wales colleagues, Mrs Williams, for their time this afternoon, and all the work that has gone into making this meeting, preparing for the meeting and giving us all of the information. So thank you all very much. And the meeting is closed at 3:44. Keep well and safe, everybody.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Wonderful. Yes. Thank you. Bye.
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 Thank you, Chair. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can, Mrs Williams. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks very much indeed. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.